Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our annual summer conference. It's a lovely day outside, but there are no windows, so you won't be able to see it. So the theme of our conference this year is, as it says, Escalating Uncertainty and Competition in Business Taxation. That was somewhat controversial within the ranks of the CBT researchers as to whether there really is escalating uncertainty and escalating competition. So you can think of perhaps this title as being somewhat provocative. You may or may not agree with it. But we have, in any case, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers to discuss it and tell us whether it is justified. I thought before introducing the speakers, I'd say why I thought it could be justified on both counts, really, both uncertainty and competition. So I think concern over uncertainty has been there for a long time. Among other things, I undertook a survey of businesses a couple of years ago asking about tax uncertainty in different places around the world. The OECD and the IMF have now taken that up and extended it, and Georgia Maffini is going to be talking about their work on that in a little while. But beyond that, beyond the kind of normal latent uncertainty, there's clearly a lot going on. There's implementation of the BEPS proposals, how they're going to be implemented country by country. Are we going to have a more harmonised set of anti-avoidance rules or a less harmonised set of anti-avoidance rules? We have state aid investigations in the EU. There's questions about how that will affect the law within the EU, possibly the UK, depending on Brexit, and then how it affects Brexit, conditional on how it affects the rest of the EU. We have Brexit itself, so that's important enough to have a whole session on that. So we have a session just after coffee. So how should we think about Brexit? Is this an opportunity to cast off the constraints of the EU fundamental freedoms? Or is it going to impose a harmful shock on the UK economy that we're going to have to change the tax system to somewhat offset? Or both? This is the kind of exam questions we like setting our MSc students. Of course, quite a lot happening in the US. There's been a lot of talk about fundamental tax reform. Whether it will ever happen, that's something we could talk about. But if it does, that's certainly creating more uncertainty and consequences for the UK and Europe. So actually, it seems to me, putting all this together, there's actually a period of unprecedented uncertainty for a variety of reasons. And where does that leave us in the UK? And what direction should we be thinking of going? When I think of the UK, actually I think of the UK as being the kind of poster child for the trade-off between increased competition and cracking down on profit shifting. We do both very well, and at extremes more than anybody else in a way. We've reduced the tax rate from 28 to 17 in recent times. I haven't seen many people argue that we had to reduce it from 20 to 17 for reasons of competition, but the government obviously thought otherwise at the time. And we've done a number of things on profit shifting, but both taking part in the cooperative system in BEPS and beginning to implement that, but also acting independently with a diverted profits tax. Looking further afield, actually, so there's a question about developing countries and the extent to which the OECD is right to try and draw in developing countries into the way that we do things in the OECD. And I think one thing that's missing from the conference title in a way is escalating complexity. So it seems to me that the outcomes of the BEPS process is certainly creating more complexity in the way that we run the international tax system. That's not good for tax authorities, it's not good for business, though it might be better for tax advisors. But I think there's a big question about whether developing countries can reasonably be expected to cope with some of the new proposed rules coming out of BEPS. And Vicki Perry is here from the IMF too. She'll be talking a little bit about that. So thinking about where we go from here, so I'll stop soon. I just thought I'd give you a little introduction before introducing all the people. I get a lot of things off my chest at the beginning of the day. It seems to me that there's a possibility of significant change. There's certainly lots of things going on. And I think it's interesting that although there's lots of things going on, there's nobody really guiding that change. or what may be happening. I mean, the OECD may think otherwise, but there are a lot of actors out there playing their own games. And there are some actors, including the UK, which seem to be playing several games at once, and it's difficult to know exactly where we're going. And when in my more pessimistic moments, I'm thinking, well, there are a lot of people out there trying to figure out what to do next, but we're doing that on a backdrop of 100 years of institution building at the OECD, double tax treaties, and beyond that, the WTO and other things. It's very difficult to actually create systematic and fundamental reform. So the kind of things that we are likely to see are, as ever, relatively small changes, which kind of leave the existing tax system probably not that far away from it is at the moment. But it's hard to say. There may be some more significant things, even though they're kind of not throwing away the entire structure that we have. So that's the pessimistic side. The optimistic side is we have a great lineup of speakers today to talk about all this. In fact, we have some of the best I think we have some of the best thinkers and speakers on this in the world. As usual, we've tried to kind of balance speakers from all kinds of backgrounds, from government, international institutions, business advisors, and even academics, with the aim of having a balanced debate. So I'm going to, first of all, introduce the first panel, and then ask them to speak, and then we'll introduce other people as we go along. So first up, this is in order of who's speaking, is Bob Stack, on my left here. Oops, I just kicked over a bottle of water. Bob recently joined Deloitte, but was previously the Deputy Assistant Secretary of International Tax Affairs at the US Treasury. And as I'm sure you all know, in that role, he led the US delegation to the OECD BEPS project. And so he played a crucial role in BEPS at the OECD. Next to speak is Georgia Maffini. Georgia is the Deputy Head of Tax Policy and Statistics Division at the OECD Centre for Tax Policy Administration. And as I'm sure many of you will recall, Georgia was previously a Senior Research Fellow of the Centre for Business Taxation, so we're delighted to welcome her back home to Oxford. The next speaker is going to be Vicki Perry, who I've mentioned. She's Assistant Director of the Fiscal Affairs Department at the IMF. She joined the IMF in the 1990s, and she's previously served as Division Chief in both the Revenue Administration and the Tax Policy Divisions. And on top of that, she is currently serving as the President of the National Tax Association in the US. The next speaker is going to be Philip Baker. Philip has spoken at many of our conferences, and we welcome him back as well. I think he needs little introduction, except perhaps to note that he's now a visiting professor in the law faculty at this august university. And that also gives me an opportunity to mention the fact that one of the reasons he's taken on that role is that he's playing an important role in our new MSc in taxation. So if you don't already know that we have a new MSc in taxation, you should do. And if you don't know anything about it, please collect a brochure on the table outside. So that was just an opportunity for me to plug the MSc. We have at least one of the students on the MSc program here, possibly more. So it's a fantastic program. This is our first year. We have a second cohort joining us in September, and it's gone extremely well, I think. Last but not least, we have Dan Shapiro, who's the Wayne Perry Professor of Taxation at New York University. He's one of the leading tax academics working in tax in the US and indeed the world. So I think we're going to have an outstanding panel. I'd like to thank them all in advance for taking part. So the aim is they're all going to speak for a few minutes, and then we're going to have some discussion and questions and answers at the end. That's all I need to say, and I'm going to invite Bob to come and start.